The movie starts with an advertisement about an adult network, a fat man standing between two hot blondes, giving the varieties of the categories. Turns out a supermarket is watching the advert. He tried to get the collection through the given phone number. He tried the number that he got. When he went through, he started spelling his name. A teenager entered the room with adult magazine and dropped it on the counter, then describes the type of porn he wanted. The kid asked him for a pack of smokes, then he pointed to a support jar. Then he threw the pack of smokes to the kid while still on the phone. While the kid was leaving the clerk, he shouted faking sixth graders. The one on the line misunderstood him, thinking he was describing his fantasy. He tried to explain, but the hang up on him, so he started smashing the phone in anger. Then a guy wearing suit enters, grabbing liqueur from the shelf. He was Clark's friend. He was asking him how the interview went for the law firm, and the guy with suit started describing all the good deals he got. The clerk asked how his girlfriend felt about him leaving her father's firm, replied that he hasn't told her. The clerk spotted what he was drinking with disgust because of the way the guy talked about how they work well with his girlfriend. Then he assures him everything is gonna be fine when he tells her. In a meanwhile, Carl and Tracy having dinner in an apartment. Tracy started telling him how crazy he is because most of their expenses are covered by her dad, and that his planning to leave her father's firm, all her families are around, and she's not sure what he wanna leave. She states that leaving her father's firm is not even an option, ignoring his opinion. Then later Carl throwing the flour in the trash can, and a dog eating from a plate. We see the Clark drinking champagne from the bottle, and he guessed how the dinner went, pointing to Carl that he agreed to Tracy and folded to keep working for her dad while petting the dog. Carl was thinking about giving her thoughtful gift, while clerk made fun of him. Carl picked up the phone to call to the firm, but the clerk challenged him to give it a weekend while they were arguing. The door got knocked, and the dog started running towards the door, barking. Both of them were stunned by the large wooden box written on it, fragile. When they open it, it's a movie booth for porn movies. Carl started accusing the clerk for him giving him advice for his life while he is spending money on such things. Clerk tried to plug it, but when Carl gave a tap on the screen, it started working. Clerk asked Carl to tie it. Carl hesitated first, then the clerk convinced him by giving him some facts about adult movies. Then the both sat inside the booth. The screen shows the first guy we saw in the advertising, asking them to pick their fleek. Carl started to describe the choices. Then they chose one and the booth started to shake, aggressive. It looks like they are going inside a portal, and they fell on an alley area. While they try to figure where they are, two cop cars came blurring their siren. Two women wearing miniskirt with high boots pointing gun asked them both to freeze. The brunette hair asks the blonde on Edafrisk, Carl the blonde. Brittany leans Carl on his back on the police car, then puts her hand on his balls and states there is a concealed weapon there, while the brunette slams the clerk by his face to the hood of the car and starts questioning him. The boys try to plead they haven't done anything wrong. The clerk gets confused because he feels like he knows them but not sure from where. In order to silence him, the brunette sprayer paper spray on his eyes. He screamed. Carl was confused if what they are wearing is a regulation uniform. As it all goes, Carl seating in an investigation room, then a male enters the room. It's Carl gets confused because he can see the outline of his hard pines and the guy running his hands over it. The guy pulls chair and sits in front of him, then starts stating some facts that Carl did not even understand. Then he stands from his sit and starts talking tough at Carl, leaning on the table. Then he leaves the room because he did not get the answer he expected. In a meanwhile, clerk sitting in an investigation room, eyes closed. He can hear through the police station speaker a woman ordering someone to clean the wet floor in a sensual way. Then a woman enters and insinuating that Carl is a piece of meat. Then when Carl opens his mouth to speak, the woman starts hitting him with the whip she's holding. Then he starts explaining that he did nothing wrong. In the cell, Carl was trying to peek through the windows, then tries to open the cell door. The door slides easily, Carl with amusement. Then he hears a footstep, then closes the cell door. The warden, a girl, shows up with two angry women, then put them the same cell as Carl. Then while the other one insults the warden, the other one pushed her and they started fighting to the ground. Then it turns out clerk's still in the investigation room as he asks the investigating officer if he knew her. Then it hits him that he knew her from porn movies, then calls her by her name, then asks if the investigation can go any harder. She pulls his hair by one and puts her other hand on his balls, then starts licking his face. We witness Carl by the women fighting inside the cell. Seems like they are giving a moaning sound while fighting, one is on top of the other. Then they leave Carl confused, then suddenly all changed and started kissing each other. At that moment, Carl stands and leaves the cell. We can see the two women tearing their cloth, revealing their cloth. The clerk is leaning on his back on the investigation room, and Carl jumped in started, but what he saw pulling Carl out of the investigation room, the officer trying to stop them. After running from the station, they end up in a suburban area with a lot of women with bikinis, pillow fighting, lying on the grass, spraying water at each other, washing cars, jumping on trampoline. Both Carl and the clerk are stunned when they see a Ford Charger with cops. They try to hide inside the car. Both the investigators are tempted to make out. The clerk and Carl try to reason out where they are, then the guy from the advert comes and tells them they are in alternate porno reality and tells them to find their purpose here. As they went into one of the houses, and while they were looking around and hid while the women entered their room and started dancing sensually, the women saw them and screamed and asking them why they were in their room. They explained how they got here. The investigators get to the house and start questioning the girls if they have seen any men and the boys hiding behind a curtain. Then it turns out to the police station, an officer stating they got a clue of where the guys are. Then meanwhile, the guys in the emergency room and living hospital porno fantasy. Then as Carl talks with one of the women about herself discovers different cheerleaders, things change in a school while the clerk imitates as being a coach, deciding selection for a cheerleader and making the women strip for him. As it goes here, Carl and the clerk look like hip-hop dancers and walk to a nightclub full of half-naked women. Both of them get surrounded by women. The woman who was previously talking to Carl entered and saw Carl with other women. She got jealous and left the party running. Then cops bust the party, pulling their guns to arrest the clerk and Carl, while all the people in the party pull guns at the cop, asking them to leave because Carl and the clerk pretended to be someone else and got protection. When the mouth guard of the clerk fell, they knew he was lying, and Carl and the clerk ran from the party, escaping the cops. Then Carl got angry at the clerk because all these things are happening because of the clerk. They fight and go their separate ways. Back from it all, hear a pizza delivery guy talking to a woman about her order, and the clerk taking off with the delivery guy car. In the next scene, we can see that the girl is mad at Carl for being with other women and telling him she don't want to see him again, while the clerk started playing as a pizza delivery guy and started playing a porno fantasy. Suddenly, the investigator enters the room and hits him with her whip, asking him where his friend is, and he escapes her looking for his friend. Then they start driving away. Turns out in the next morning, as everybody having fun, the men trying to jump in the pool to return to their reality, and the guy who created the fantasy world returns to his reality while the clerk is still in the fantasy world, asking the creator what he did to his friend. The guy explains the only way you can return it's if he falls in love, and Carl falls in love with one of the women. Here now, Carl falls to the other world, and the clerk asks to leave, but the creator tells him that he is his father, and the clerk faints. As Tracy starts shouting at Carl, the Carl lashes at her and breaks up with her, and also, the clerk is enjoying the time in the fantasy world, while Carl lays on his bed, opens the TV, and sees his clerk on an advertisement about the porno fantasy world. His clerk friend transported the girl Carl liked to the real world because he wanted his friend to be happy. The movie ends with Carl kissing the girl on the bed. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.